Argentina was in the grip of a ruthless dictatorship when the biggest art theft in the country's history took place. Paintings by some of Europe's most famous artists of the 19th and 20th centuries. For more than 20 years, the works, including some by Renoir, Gauguin, and Degas, fell into a black hole. Nothing was seen or heard of them until an American woman walked into Sotheby's in London. But where had the paintings been for 2 decades? The robbery triggered dark rumors of who might be behind the theft, and suggestions that the heist was part of a huge arms for art deal to sustain the junta. But why were these paintings targeted? It was a mystery that crisscrossed 3 continents and was finally resolved in a Parisian courtroom. But would the museum in Buenos Aires ever get its priceless collection back? Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. It's Christmas Eve, 1980. Argentina is under the yoke of a brutal military dictatorship. For many years, it has brought fear and apprehension. But on this day, life in the capital seems as normal as could be. While most of the country is getting on with the Christmas celebrations, an extraordinary robbery is about to take place at the nation's greatest art gallery. A mysterious gang breaks into the Museum of Fine Arts in the city center. The treasures held in the museum had been left virtually unguarded over the Christmas period. Sometime after midnight, a car pulls up outside the museum. Its mysterious occupants make their way towards the rear of the building. Once inside the museum, the thieves seem to have the gallery to themselves. They know exactly what they are after. Their target is some of the gallery's most precious works. Amongst the stolen paintings is Head of a Young Girl with a Blue Ribbon by Auguste Renoir. The Call by Paul Gauguin. And The Road by Paul Cézanne. In all, 16 Impressionist paintings are stolen, together with 7 ornaments. Their work done, the thieves make their way undetected into the Buenos Aires night. With a few exceptions, the stolen works had one thing in common. They were part of the collection of a wealthy Argentinian socialite called Mercedes Santamarina. The robbery was a devastating blow to the family.
The reaction of the family when the collection was stolen was we were very sad, really very sad, because the authorities were not able to put the security measures or the necessary or minimum security measures to avoid this act. It was not one piece of art that was stolen, but 16 pieces of art, so it was an important action of the thieves. So we were really very sad and very annoyed.
The theft was a huge loss to the nation and to Argentina's foremost museum.
The Santa Marina collection is very, very important for our Fine Arts Museum of Buenos Aires. The collection is really, really very important and strong for us because it's not only the quality of the paintings, but also it's very, very important period.
In fact, only a small part of the huge Santa Marina collection was stolen in the Christmas Eve heist, and many of the most prized pieces were missed altogether by the gang.
All these Degas are exceptional, and they're part of the Santa Marina collection. Particularly this one here, it is said to be the biggest pastel work made by Degas of dancers.
As well as the paintings, the Mercedes collection also included other exceptional pieces which were left behind after the robbery.
There's objects and paintings here which are more proper of a museum of decorative arts than a fine arts museum, but the legacy had it as a condition to be exhibited together, and we've been trying to keep that atmosphere of the 19th century, which they wanted when they did donate it.
How the gang selected which paintings to steal isn't clear, except, it seems, only the smaller pieces were taken.
They did take 2 drawings from Degas. And also a pencil drawing by Matisse. Also a drawing by Rodin. Maybe those were the most valuable things. They took all small pieces, which I suppose that they're easy to handle and easy to take. Of course, that was a great loss.
The Santa Marina collection had been brought together over decades by Mercedes. She lived in luxury in Buenos Aires, but she never married and had no children.
I remember when I visited Mercedes Santa Marina's house here in Buenos Aires, and it was like visiting a museum. I mean, it was really, the house was very tidy. I mean, everything was very correct. I mean, there were no kids in the house, so the house was very nice, and it was like visiting a museum. And I really liked the Renoir very much. Mercedes Santa Marina, he had a good eye. She flew to Paris very frequently, and she bought many of the painters and many of the pieces of art there, also here in Argentina, some of them.
During her lifetime, Mercedes Santa Marina had already donated her vast and extraordinary collection to the Museum of Fine Art.
She liked to keep the collection all together, and this was one of the main reasons for keeping the collection in the country, in the best museum of Argentina. She thought it was the best museum. She decided to donate the whole collection only with one condition. There must be a permanent exhibition of this collection. There has to be a specific place called La Sala Mercedes Santa Marina for that.
This was the collection that was targeted by the robbers. The police investigation into the heist started on Christmas Day.
We arrived at the museum on the 25th, after lunchtime, when they discovered the robbery. I remember very well the floor and all the frames around, and the police. They cut all the frames, and they took the paintings, but leave the frames on the floor.
What soon became clear to investigators was the absence of any real security at the gallery. The entire museum was protected on Christmas Eve by just one armed watchman and a fireman.
The fireman or the guard at some point had dinner because it was a Christmas night, and had dinner and had some cider, toasted, and went to bed by midnight. Only in the morning they started walking through the galleries as they normally did each day, and there they found that they had been stolen. So it must have occurred after midnight and before they made their round next morning. So presumably 3, 4 in the morning that must have occurred.
When the guards woke up, it was already too late. The thieves had escaped with the 16 paintings and 7 decorative objects.
All this new part of the museum was being built at the time, and the new galleries were being refurbished. So the safety conditions at the time were quite low. Police found that they came through this part of the building and they could easily jump in. There were no alarms, there were no really security measures that could have restrained the theft.
But who could have been responsible for this audacious robbery? In 1980, Argentina had been living under the rule of a military junta for 4 years. Thousands of political activists, trade unionists, and students disappeared, presumed dead. Torture and state-sponsored killings by death squads were commonplace. The police and the security forces were above the law. So who would uncover the truth about the theft of the paintings?
En aquel momento, digamos, la justicia estaba.
At that time, the Argentinian criminal justice system was controlled by the military, and the police were under the army, so any possibility of a thorough investigation was denied.
With the military regime in Argentina, the atmosphere was very heavy. A very dangerous job was to be a journalist at that time. For us, that personally I was a political correspondent, the robbery was the priority number 12,000. With 30,000 people disappearing, to investigate who robbed the Impressionists was my last priority.
Under this climate of fear, no one came forward to provide information about the robbery. But there was one unnamed witness who claimed to have seen something that was enough to scare away anyone interested in the case.
Señala la existencia.
One of the very few witness accounts said that, at the time when the robbery occurred, there was a green Ford Falcon parked outside the museum with 4 people inside it.
The cars in which the plainclothes intelligence agents operated were the green Ford Falcons. Those were the cars they used to detain their political enemies, the people who would later end up dead or disappeared.
The Ford Falcon was a horrendous image. For us, it was the image of terror. With someone with a gun ordering all the cars to move away. I was working in front of one of these police departments that apparently was a concentration camp, and I will never forget this fear each time that we saw a Falcon Verde. Really, as the history tells you, was the symbol of terror in Argentina.
existen grandes sospechas de que la zona haya estado liberada.
It is widely suspected that the area where the museum is located was liberated. In Argentinian police jargon, this means that before a crime occurs, an agreement is reached with the authorities in charge of the area where the crime will take place so that they turn a blind eye while the crime actually is taking place.
So the rumors at that time were that probably behind the robbery was the Secret Service.
It made sense. The Secret Service was perhaps the only organization that could get away with such a brazen heist. But if they were responsible, who was going to take the blame? A scapegoat needed to be found, and found quickly. And the easiest solution was to go for the softest target.
Los principales sospechosos de haber sido los entregadores.
The main suspects for the robbery were the two security guards who were at the museum on the night of the robbery.
Some of the personnel of the museum was taken and tortured to confess if they had done it.
After a terrible but brief ordeal, the security guards were freed and returned to their normal lives.
Rápidamente y aún bajo esas adversas.
They were quickly cleared of any charges, because even under the dire situation at the time, it was clear that the poor guys had nothing to do with it.
But who was responsible then? For years, the robbery from the Fine Art Museum fell from public view. But in 1982, the junta invaded the Falklands, a British territory in the South Atlantic. An international arms embargo was imposed. British forces retook the islands in months. The junta was humiliated by the defeat, and within a year, the military regime was gone. It was only after the junta collapsed that information about the art robbery began to leak out. Amid infighting amongst shadowy intelligence groups, a high-ranking kidnapping took place aimed at settling old scores between different factions. A man suspected of being a double agent was abducted and tortured. His name was Patricio Kelly.
En esa banda operativa después secuestran a Guillermo Patricio Kelly.
During the kidnap, Patricio Kelly was almost killed. The case was highly publicized. In this case, the kidnapping had not been motivated by money, but for personal revenge, springing from the fights between the different intelligence services that existed in Argentina.
The man behind the kidnapping was Anibal Gordon, who worked for the most infamous intelligence service operating at the time, the XVID. Gordon was sent to prison for 8 years for the kidnapping. And it was in jail that evidence implicating him in the robbery from the Fine Arts Museum came to light, allegedly from his own mouth.
No obstante, poco después, estando Aníbal Gordon ya preso.
When Anibal Gordon was already in prison and dying from terminal cancer, he told another prisoner that he had been behind the robbery.
This was the man who Gordon apparently confessed to. His name was Juan Carlos Perez. He was a prisoner with privileges. He used to deliver food and clean the cell block.
He was a common prisoner, a former bank robber who had access to the part of the jail where the people accused of state terrorism were held. The prisoner told me this story personally.
Me contó aquella versión. Una persona que está al borde de la muerte.
A person who is on the brink of death, as Gordon was, as he was suffering from terminal cancer, doesn't tend to lie. He is meant to have complained of receiving too little money for stealing the paintings, following instructions from somebody else above him.
Perez is the only source for Gordon's confession to the robbery. After his release from prison, Perez was interviewed on television in 1993. Within 2 years, he was shot dead trying to rob a hardware store. As for Gordon, he died in 1988. And if he was responsible, he took to the grave his motives and who ultimately stood to gain.
I link this robbery with the infighting in the military junta between two groups that want to be president and need money for make that possible. So I believe that is the reason because they rob the museum and try to sell the pictures abroad and fail.
So 8 years after the robbery, the pictures were still missing, and the only suspect was dead. The trail had run cold. But in 2001, there was a sudden breakthrough, 6,000 miles away in one of the art-dealing capitals of the world, London. At the city's heart is the famous auction house, Sotheby's. It's no stranger to dealing with unusual customers from all over the world. Today was no exception. At around 11 a.m., the doors opened to welcome a blonde-haired Texan woman. She introduced herself as Gabriella Williams.
She was a rather extraordinary sight. She's not very tall. She had hair down to her waist, a huge amount of jewelry, and very expansive.
From her handbag, she produced 16 photos of paintings and drawings by some of the giants of Impressionist art: Renoir, Cézanne, Gauguin, Matisse, Degas. She said she represented 2 linked charities. Her own was based in Texas, called Humana Way International, and a second charity based in South America, the De La Voix Trust, which owned the art. The trust had already put a price tag on the collection, a staggering $350 million. But she wanted Sotheby's to make their own independent valuation. She said she then intended to take them to a bank and use them as security for a loan to raise funds for the charity.
This whole scheme of hypothecation, which means taking art to a bank or some other organization who will lend money on it, was developed as a scheme in order that they could get hold of some money before the art was actually sold.
Sotheby's agreed to give Gabriella Williams her valuation, but first they needed to see the pictures in the flesh to be sure they were the real thing. Williams then made a surprising revelation. The collection was in storage on the other side of the world, in Taiwan. It emerged that the president of the South American De La Voix Trust, a timber merchant called Arthur Lung, was Taiwanese, and that he'd stored the pictures in his home country. Unperturbed, Sotheby's decided to send an expert from their Hong Kong office along with their representative in Taiwan. Gabriella Williams also flew out, and completing the gathering was Arthur Lung himself.
They were taken by a confusing route to a warehouse which also had some form of office in it, and these drawings and pictures were laid out in a drawer.
The pictures were brought out for the Sotheby's staff to inspect, and they started to take photos for their records. But when they came to the loose canvases, no longer pegged out on their wooden stretchers, they realized this was no ordinary viewing.
They weren't framed, they weren't on display, they were clearly being concealed.
But the collection was a gold mine. There were 3 small oil paintings by Renoir, all less than 50 centimeters across. 2 Cézanne watercolors on paper, including 1 trademark still life. 2 Degas sketches of the familiar ballerinas, a Tahitian scene by Gauguin, a line drawing by Matisse, and watercolors by the sculptor Rodin. The Sotheby's staff confirmed that the works were genuine and added a price tag of over $4 million, a lot less than the charity's own estimate of $350 million. As a routine precaution, Sotheby's in London then contacted Julian Radcliffe at the Art Loss Register, a business set up to allow the art trade to check whether works put up for sale are legitimate.
We register about 10,000 stolen items a year, and we have on our database about 180,000 stolen items, and we check over 300,000 items being sold every year, and we match about 3 a week. So we have at any one time well over 150 negotiations underway.
When the call came in from Sotheby's with details of the 16 pictures in Taiwan, staff at the Art Loss Register began checking the descriptions against the list of missing artwork on their database. Their searches soon produced a number of close similarities with an entire collection listed as stolen. The alarm bells began to ring.
Our staff immediately realized that they had been registered with us after the theft by the Argentinian Museum, and we were able to make a very simple match because they were all together. And we then immediately contacted the police, the museum in Argentina, and we also obviously notified Sotheby's.
In Argentina, the National Museum of Fine Arts in Buenos Aires were amazed to discover that their missing paintings had turned up in Taiwan.
El entonces director del museo en esa fecha, Jorge Glucksberg.
The director of the museum at the time, Jorge Glucksberg, received the news with some surprise, because this theft was considered to be one of the robberies of the century. So he took things slowly and sought advice from his superiors and from lawyers as to the next steps to follow.
Mantener el contacto. Estuve en esa época.
I was very excited because to recover that loot was a great thing for the country.
Recuperar este botín era.
The pictures had finally emerged after 20 years in the shadows. It was crucial to seize the moment before they disappeared from view once again. Top of Radcliffe's list was a meeting with the Texan woman who had set the ball rolling in Sotheby's, Gabriella Williams. 2 weeks and a few phone calls later, Radcliffe located her in Spain, where she was on holiday. She agreed to talk, and Radcliffe jumped on the next plane out of London. Gabriella Williams revealed how her involvement with the paintings began, and even handed over documents to back it up. But she insisted she had acted in good faith.
Her explanation was that she was trying to raise money for charitable purposes. And she said that she'd been contacted by a number of people in the States who had been asked to help hypothecate or raise money from these pictures.
It was a complicated chain of introductions, but at the end of the line was Arthur Lung, president of the obscure charity, the De Lavore Trust, based in the small South American country of Suriname. Lung was looking for a partner to front a bid to raise money from the pictures. Williams, it was said, was looking for funds for her charity. There is no evidence to suggest that Gabriella Williams acted other than in good faith. By March 2001, Williams and Lung had a deal, signing a series of agreements appointing each other to the boards of their two charities. A month later, she was in London for her meeting at Sotheby's, armed with a set of documents provided by Lung, in which a series of apparently eminent individuals endorsed the collection as legitimate. Suriname and Arthur Lung were Radcliffe's next targets.
I contacted Arthur Lung in Suriname and explained to him that the pictures were stolen and that I wanted to go to Taiwan in order to arrange for their surrender. I explained that they would never be able to sell them and that if they did not cooperate in their surrender, then we might well be able to get the police interested in their travel activities. And I knew that Arthur Lung had a house in Los Angeles, so I knew that he would not want to have any question about his passport. He then told me that his brother would like to see me in Taiwan and gave me every indication that the pictures would be surrendered.
Negotiations then began to visit Arthur Lung's brother, Yunhui Lung, the keeper of the pictures in Taiwan. In January 2002, after a series of delays, he finally agreed to a meeting in the capital, Taipei. Radcliffe set off from London, optimistic about the fate of the pictures. In January 2002, Julian Radcliffe arrived in Taiwan to deal with the man who apparently had possession of the paintings stolen from the Fine Art Museum in Buenos Aires more than 20 years earlier. Julian Radcliffe met Yunhui Lung in the lobby of his hotel in Taipei.
When I was in Taiwan, it was clear that Lung was really after money. He was very truculent. He said that the West had raided the civilization in China, which is true, and looted a lot of Chinese national treasures, which are now all over Western Europe museums. And therefore, why should they surrender these pictures? And he pretended that he had bought them in good faith. He wouldn't provide any evidence that he bought them in good faith, so I knew he hadn't.
Radcliffe returned empty-handed, but he felt his trip had not been a complete failure. During their conversation, Lung had let slip a piece of information which Radcliffe felt could unlock one of the darkest mysteries of the case: the strange connection between Argentina and Taiwan.
I asked him what would encourage him to surrender the pictures besides a payment, which we didn't want to make. He said that if he was told by the government of Taiwan to surrender the pictures, then he would do so. I then asked him which ministry he was referring to, and he said the Ministry of Defense.
The military connection made a fascinating tie-in with one of the early rumors back in Buenos Aires. It might explain the car seen outside the museum, and it might suggest that the Argentine Secret Service had originally been involved in the theft of the paintings.
At that time, when the robbery happened, the links between Taiwan and Argentina were quite intense. I don't know why the robberies went there to Taiwan, but usually the link between the Taiwanese officials and the Argentinian officials were very intense at that period.
There was a possible basis for this intense relationship. Argentina needed arms at the time of an international arms embargo against the junta.
Argentina was under a military embargo during the military times, especially from the United States and from Europe, and they don't have any possibility to buy arms anywhere. So they use Taiwan a lot as a triangulation for arms, okay? So the arms went generally to Taiwan, and then Taiwan canceled to Argentina.
Radcliffe soon had his own theory. Perhaps the paintings found their way to Taiwan as payment for an arms deal.
I wondered whether some of the arms might then have been sold on for the Falklands War when Argentina was finding it very difficult to obtain weapons and Taiwan was not abiding by the United Nations sanctions. I don't think anybody is saying that there was a predetermined theft to supply arms. But what one suspected was that the Argentinian military junta, who continued to control these pictures some years after the theft, we believe, may have decided to use them to try and get arms when they needed foreign exchange to do so.
I think it's a very good adventure to tell, but I don't know if it's true or not.
Whatever the truth of these theories, the fact was that the 16 valuable paintings were still under lock and key in the Lung's vault in Taiwan. But then, 4 months later, another city was added to the growing list of locations embroiled in the case. Paris, where Mercedes Santamarina had bought the pictures originally, now became the setting for a dramatic new development. On May 15, 2002, a Taiwanese businessman walked into one of the many art galleries located in Saint-Germain, the artistic quarter of Paris. The gallery's owner, Pascal Landsberg, recognized him at once.
I know this man since the 90s because he used to buy some Chinese painting from me in the middle of the 90s. He always mentioned that his uncle have a collection of Impressionist painting in Taiwan and called me and asking me if I can make some estimation for those paintings because this uncle was ready to sell a few of them.
That day, Pascal Landsberg's client arrived with a portfolio containing 3 items from his uncle's collection. Renoir's oil painting Head of a Young Girl with a Blue Ribbon, Gauguin's drawing The Call, and Cézanne's watercolor The Road. Unknown to Landsberg, all 3 were from the stolen collection now in the hands of the Lung brothers in Taipei.
I was surprised, not for the drawing and the work on paper, but I was surprised for the painting. He came with the painting without any frame, without just canvas, you know. And this made me feel a little bit strange, but I don't mention anything to him. I make a receipt, I keep the painting with me.
The man trying to sell the paintings was Yayo Huang, a Taiwanese concert promoter. Perhaps he deliberately chose the small gallery, believing that it would not have the resources to run a check. If so, it was a major miscalculation.
I start to make my research, and the Renoir I knew, I saw it in the catalog, but for the Cézanne, I don't have the book to check all the aquarelle, as well for the Gauguin. I didn't know anything. I have a close friend of mine who is Philippe Cazot, who is specialist in Impressionist and modern painting. So asking him to check if he can find something. And one day he called me to say, Pascal, something strange, because this drawing is supposed to be in a museum. So it's a fake one or it's stolen, something wrong with this drawing. It cannot be the one of the museum.
Landsberg's friend advised him to contact the Art Loss Register in London to double-check that the Gauguin was not stolen.
And immediately, 1 hour after, I receive a call. The boss of the company said, okay, I come tomorrow, I have a big problem, I have to talk to you. I come immediately, tomorrow I'm here.
These 3 pictures were 3 of the more valuable pictures out of those stolen from Argentina. and we informed the French art dealer that they were stolen.
Radcliffe also told Landsberg his own theory about the stolen paintings being somehow tied up in a clandestine arms deal.
At this moment, I start to feel a little bit scared because he's asking me to keep the painting, and I say, well, please bring me some police. I don't want, you told me about a seller of a weapon. I don't want to be killed to keep this painting. I have to find, you must find something official to not authorize me to give back because I don't want anything dangerous for me.
Radcliffe alerted the French authorities and then asked Landsberg to arrange for him to meet Mr. Huang in person at the gallery.
I was shown upstairs and met the Taiwanese individual who had brought the paintings in for sale.
The owner of Art Register came and he showed his passport and he said, I'm Mr. Julian Radcliffe, I'm the boss of this company, and can you show me your passport? The client said, no, I don't have to show you anything.
He became very nervous and angry and jumped up and down. He said that it was outrageous that we were going to seize the pictures and that the pictures weren't stolen. And he tried the same arguments which Mr. Lung had used on me, that they had been bought legitimately by Mr. Lung, even though no evidence was ever provided.
My client was not scared at all. He said, no, we have everything, we own the painting. He don't feel any scare. He called his uncle in Taiwan, they talk in Chinese together. And I explained to him that I cannot give back the painting like this because police will be involved, the court will be involved. So my client accepts. He says, okay, wait. We know that we own the painting, we have the proof. It's okay.
Pascal Landsberg was then asked by the French courts to hold on to the 3 pictures while legal proceedings got underway.
I have it in a storage. There was the piece together in a cartoon. And I feel scared a few times because this very small cartoon was in my reserve. We always move, and sometimes I say, where are those paintings?
Meanwhile, contact was made with the museum in Buenos Aires to give them the good news.
Nos piden de manera urgente. We
were asked to urgently send to Paris the documents proving the museum's ownership of these paintings. I took part in preparing all the documentation. The deed of transfer for the donation of these paintings to the museum by Mercedes Santamarina. This was presented immediately to the court.
Now based in Paris, Argentinian journalist Maria Laura Avignolo had also received a tip-off about the discovery of the paintings.
The Argentinian ambassador in Paris, Archibaldo Lanús, called me one day and told me that we have to have tea because he had a great story to tell me. The paintings, the Impressionists, come up apparently in Taiwan. Archie, as we call him, loved art, was a great ambassador here, and he loved culture, and everybody knows that. So I make an agreement with him saying that I will don't publish if he was telling me step by step what we were doing.
Lo que sí que era una tarea así de un poco de detective, eso era lo divertido, ¿no?
It was a detective's role. That was the fun part of it, between Radcliffe, who was a well-informed man with loads of personality, and this mystery owner who never showed up. It made an entertaining affair. Back at the embassy, we don't really handle cases like this.
Ownership of the 3 paintings would now be left to the courts. Meanwhile, Julian Radcliffe embarked on a bold bid to lure the rest of the collection to Paris. He installed himself in a hotel in a quiet side street of central Paris, then invited Huang to meet him.
Our strategy was to say to the Taiwanese man in Paris, Yeho Huang, that he should bring all the other pictures from Taiwan to Paris and surrender all of them to the Argentinian government. And one of the points of pressure we brought on him was to point out that he'd smuggled 3 pictures into Paris and that the French authorities wouldn't like that, but if he brought all the others in, then they might be prepared to accept that he had done something technically wrong but not pursue it. When Huang was negotiating with us, it was clear that they wanted cash if they were going to surrender the pictures. We had to make them understand that there was no way in which we were prepared to pay any money to them for the surrender of the pictures unless they gave us the full intelligence about how they'd obtained them. They were not prepared to do that because they knew that if they gave us that information, it would show that they had no title to the pictures whatsoever.
The negotiations were in deadlock, and both sides handed it over to their lawyers. Radcliffe met with the French lawyer representing the Taiwanese. He was increasingly confident of recovering the remaining pictures.
He was a sophisticated operator, and we thought that he was a man of the world who'd be able to persuade the Taiwanese to do a deal and surrender the pictures.
But fate had a last bizarre twist in store for the ill-starred Santa Marina collection. Radcliffe might have thought he was getting nearer to the stolen paintings, but the French lawyer, in whom Radcliffe seemed to be investing so much hope, turned out to not be quite what he seemed.
Un día en una audiencia, cuando fuimos para ver, tratar de ya de conciliar y que nos devolvieran los cuadros.
One day we went to a meeting to negotiate a final settlement and get the paintings back, and he just didn't show up. And then we learned he had been arrested for some issue in Africa.
He became involved in some African dealing with diamonds and gold, and they put him in jail.
And Mr. Huang went back to Taiwan, and we had nobody who we could negotiate with. And although the pictures had been seized by the court, they weren't prepared to actually hand them over to the Argentinians until they'd had some contact with the Taiwanese.
For 3 years, the whole process once again ground to a standstill. The 13 pictures in Taiwan had again slipped out of reach, and even the 3 in Paris were tied up in legal red tape. In desperation, Julian Radcliffe tried to speed things up, bypassing the whole legal process.
One day, Mr. Radcliffe called me and said that the ambassador of Argentina will be in Paris. He tried to push me to give back those paintings. I don't understand, because I said, I have a responsibility to keep the painting. I don't have any order from the court, from the police. I have to keep them. He never called me back. Never. I realized that his job is to recover paintings stolen and to get a commission. He worked like a bounty hunter.
So Landsberg refused to hand over the paintings until the legal go-ahead was given. But it was 6 months before a decision seemed imminent. Only then did the authorities in Argentina at last snap into action. They appointed to the case a prominent investigating judge to go to Europe to get the paintings back. With him went an agent from Interpol Argentina, Marcelo Elhebi, and on behalf of the Ministry of Culture, Americo Castilla, now director of the Museum of Fine Arts in Buenos Aires. In November 2005, the three men flew to Paris to recover the pictures which still languished in the safe room at the Darga and Landsberg Gallery. A hearing was convened in the grandiose surroundings of the French police headquarters in the center of Paris, and Radcliffe was summoned to appear before the Argentinian judge.
The judge sat at the end of the table with a set of black gloves in front of him, dark glasses, looking somewhat strange, if not menacing. He was impressed by the end of the question and answer session that we were able to give very full and detailed accounts of what had happened. We had 9 volumes of files that I took to Paris so that we could check all the facts, so that the French authorities and the Argentinians were confident that the pictures could be handed over with no problem.
The police said to me, no, we will give back the painting to the museum. So they came in the gallery to take the painting, and they do it legally, yeah.
On November 14, 2005, the 3 pictures were handed over to the Argentine delegation in Paris. Within days, the paintings were on their way back home, protected by the man from Argentine Interpol.
Las pinturas en realidad vinieron en la mano, la tenía tanto el juez como su secretario.
The paintings traveled back in our hands, me, the judge, and the secretary, passing them around depending on the situation. But we never left them alone, and we never let them out of our sight, so that we didn't lose them again.
Para, por supuesto, no perderlas de vista nuevamente.
Finally, nearly a quarter of a century after the original theft, the pictures arrived back inside the Museum of Fine Arts in Buenos Aires. A ceremony was held to welcome the long-lost paintings home. Despite the long absence, the staff searched the stores to see if the original frames could still be found.
So here's the 3 pieces we recovered last year. There's Gauguin, Renoir, and Cézanne. Personnel from this museum kept the frames as if waiting for them to come back. That frame which says Gauguin, and the name of the painting is The Call. I like to imagine it was called by the museum to come back. Same thing with the Cézanne. But those 2 are the original frames that came with a donation from the Santa Maria family. The only frame which wasn't found was the Renoir.
We were not notified, nothing. We heard about it just in the paper. We were very happy with this, very happy. In particular, I was very happy with the recovery of the Renoir. It was very nice.
I feel proud. I feel that finally, it was nice to be Argentinian and to be part of an operation that we're recovering something that is part of our history.
To have recovered these 3 is like a symbol of the importance of our museum and our care for what we have. A great joy.
But despite all the fanfare, the fate of the 13 missing paintings is still unclear. Among them, rare works by Matisse, Cézanne, Renoir, and Degas. Will they ever be found?
I don't believe that the government will recover more paintings because they will have to pay, and they are not interested. So I believe that the robbery of the Impressionists reflects of a country with instability, because they've been robbed during the dirty war, nobody looked for them. And now, with the democracy, nobody is interested in them anymore. There are 3 there, and nobody remembers the other ones that are still in Taiwan.
The other 13 are somewhere, probably under the control, directly or indirectly, of the Taiwanese. One day they may try to sell them, and that's probably when we find them.